Okay, Gary, we're going to go ahead and get started on your restoration service process. Okay, first thing we got to do is get the watch movement out of the case, which on these is very straightforward. So there's your case back. What I'd like to do is take a few things off before we really get things out. So your winding components come off. It's interesting on these later movements from the mid-70s, before they discontinued the line and went over to the turtles or the 6309s. These had a straight, some of them at least, have a straight edge on the bridges. And you can see that here. Some of the earlier ones have what's called a chamfered edge, which is a shiny edge, which is a little bit different. Okay, there we go. Very nice and clean. All right, I'm going to take the power out of your mainspring. We should see the hairspring and balance come to a rest. There we go. Okay. So now we can go ahead and take your movement out of your case, revealing your dial and hands. Let's go ahead and do that. All right. Wow. Lovely. Lovely. Okay. So let's go ahead and remove your dial and hands. Second hand. Minute hand. Hour hand. Perfect. Okay, now we can remove your dial. And we get to look at the date of manufacture of the dial and compare that to the date of manufacture of the case, or at least the stamping of the case back. Okay, let's do one more turn of this screw. 6/9, and your case back is 6 November, which is 11. Perfect. 2 months separated. Very nice. Okay. Very good. Okay. Alrighty, so now we're going to go ahead and get started getting your movement. Okay, Gary. Well, now it's time to go ahead and start with the breaking down of the movement. So, first thing we do is we take out your die shock. And then we can remove your balance. Okay. Now we remove the pallet fork, which is part of your lever escapement. So this is the object that goes tick-tock within your watch. It incrementally releases the power from the gear train through the movement of the balance. Take a very close look at this. Make sure it's in good shape. Yes, the faces of your jewels look good. Okay, so now we can turn our attention to the ratchet wheel of the mainspring. Okay, so what you can see here, this is the problem with 6000 series movements. So even though you have worn this watch sparingly throughout its life, which you can tell from the exterior, and of course you've taken very good care of it, the barrel itself is mounted in the main plate of the watch. This is what has all the power within the movement. This is the thing that is wound by the movement of your wrist. You're winding a big spring that lives inside of this barrel. And you can see that end right there is jiggling like crazy. Let me see if I can get this to zoom here. It's really moving. And so in that process, it digs that ratchet wheel into this plate. And you can see it right here. This is why we jewel these watches, because we want to remove that error of Seiko, which is that they never jeweled these. These were considered, not necessarily disposable, but certainly not something that people would hold on to for 50 years and covet. It was a tool watch. It was a thing to be utilized and replaced. And now we know these things are something that needs to be cared for in a way that's different. And so we're going to replace this upper component, that's the upper Arbor port jewel, and we're going to jewel the lower mainspring Arbor port. So we're going to see what that looks like in a moment. And you can see some of the S2 lubricant, some of the material that's used within the mainspring, which is that black material. That actually, when it leaves the mainspring, it brings with it parts of the mainspring barrel and some other sort of metal bits, and it becomes a bit of a grinding paste over time, and it really does the toll on your main plate, which is soft. It's made out of brass, and so brass versus steel, which is what your barrel arbor is made out of, brass always loses. All right, so we're going to jewel that, of course. We're going to check all of your jewels and your existing jewels and bushings and make sure they're in good shape. So here come your train of wheels. There's your third wheel. Here's your escape wheel, which is part of your lever escapement. Here's your hacking lever. Okay, so here is what we're going to see. Yeah. You see all that black material there? That is your lower mainspring Arbor port, or your Arbor, lower mainspring Arbor itself. And here's the port that it lives in. And we're going to Joule this and essentially take the lifetime of the watch to effectively infinity. That will be nice. We're going to remove your mainspring from here and clean that, and we'll get that taken care of. Okay, so I'm going to remove your center wheel cock, which is that little guy right there. That leaves your center wheel, which seems to be fairly well seated. Okay, now we're going to switch over to the calendar side and take apart your calendar works. Okay, so we need a different screwdriver here. So nice to work on a movement that's never been touched. Shockingly, we had one screw that has actually broken. I didn't mention this, but your dial foot screw broke as I was taking it off. Luckily, with these, they're not under any pressure or tension, and because there's no rust, I was able to actually get the stud out of the movement, which is good. So we just replaced that small screw. It's a special kind of screw. It has a rounded head, but I have those. All right. So here's your calendar. That's your wheel. All right. So here are the rest of your calendar components. So these are all reduction geared and are part of the calendar and setting components. This is your cannon pinion, which helps to set the watch. That's how we do that. Get your center wheel. Okay, so now it's just a set of components of your, it's called your keyless works, which is your setting, date and time setting. Here's your other dia shock. It's part of your balance. Take that out. Comes right out. That's a sort of a Joule that's removable from the main plate and the balance. You'll have to excuse the snoring in the background if you can hear it. My dogs, of course, are always here snoring, filling up the background sound with their... Oh, that's very interesting. I wonder if this this has a factory slip, what looks like here, like the screwdriver of some sort slipped off and put some gouges in this little plate. It's always interesting to see what happens at the factory in the production process. That's so interesting. So here's again, this is where we're going to put the Joule, right in this spot. It's particularly challenging on the 6105 and 6117 main plates because they have a sort of asymmetric buildup of material on this side and nothing on this side. So you have to be very careful when you Joule these, not to have the Jouling process migrate inward towards the center of the movement. Just an extra precaution that you got to take in this process. All right. There we go. Come off. Fairly easy. Away. Take this spring out. Okay, so now keyless works comes apart. Here's your okay, and there we go. All right, so that is your movement broken down. We're gonna go through the process now of doing the jouling. So that is something I don't do on video because it's very challenging and sort of a process that's not easily recorded. But when we come back, this will be clean. You'll have a new Joule. You have a new Joule in here as well. So in your upper mainspring Arbor, which is now a bushing, that bushing will replace with a hardened Joule, which are made by us. We are custom making these Joules for this purpose. So it's very nice. They're made here in the United States, and we're extremely proud to have them available. Okay, well, next thing you'll see is a cleaned and movement ready to be reassembled. I'll be right back. Okay, it's time to get going on getting your watch back together. So let's get that process rolling. We have come out of the cleaning and rejuling and jouling and evaluating, and everything looks great. I'm really happy with where we are. Just to point out, here are your two new Joules. You've got an upper mainspring and a lower mainspring Arbor port Joule, and that will take care of some obvious issues with the barrel to make sure that it's well positioned and not moving in ways that it shouldn't. It's unfortunately just one of those things with these Seiko movements. They were never jeweled in the right spot. But now they are, if they come here. All right, so let's go ahead and start to get your train put together. Everything came out so nice out of the cleaner. A lot of times these gears will have suffered some water damage over the years, the wheels, and these you can just tell they've been dry, and they're so clean and so nice. So we're gonna get them back together here. All right. And there goes your barrel. Where it should be. All right, so now let's go ahead and put your escape wheel in. My goodness, my dog's in the background licking something, but I'm not sure what. George? Okay. Get your hacking lever in. Sits nicely there. And now your third wheel. We gently lubricate your fourth wheel shaft. That goes in place, just like so. Okay, so now yeah, you can really see where the barrel has dug into the plate here over time. That's why I ask people not to use watch winders with these kinds of watches if they haven't been jeweled, because it's just constant movement of the barrel. Okay, let's get everybody aligned, and there we go. Let's make sure we're perfect. That's just perfect. Good. Nice and free running. It's so nice to see that. Good end shake. So we are going to cinch that down. Do a spot lubrication here. There we go. Excuse me. All right, so now it's time for your click spring. Oh, come on. Oh, you are a devilish little friend. Oh, come on. Seriously. Don't give me such a hard time. You're slightly magnetized. Excuse me. Okay. There we go. Good. Time for your ratchet wheel. Good. Okay. Let's take a look at your train. That looks really good. Now, it's time to lubricate. Third wheel. Center wheel. Escape wheel. All right, now that we've done that, we can flip the movement and install some components on this side that we need to run the train, and also add lubrication to the third and escape wheels. There we go. I'm going to lubricate your center wheel so we can put on your cannon pinion. This is the component that couples the train side motion to the calendar side motion, and also is a slip joint that allows the hands to be set because they are attached. Your minute hand is actually attached to this, and then there's a gear reduction for your hour hand. So it's a very important piece to have right, in fact. Okay, now your die shock for your lower pivot of your balance. Sorry for the snoring in the background. That's, of course, the dogs, who are never far. Okay. Good. All right, so now what we have to do is install your pre-lubricated pallet fork, which again has to go into your tick-tock component. This is the rocker that goes back and forth, part of the lever escapement mechanism. What's remarkable about pallet fork is that its pivot jewels are not lubricated. They go in dry because the addition of lubrication actually is so high in viscous friction that it reduces performance. So we don't lubricate that. Let's give it a little twist here. See if we got it. It's engaged the way we want it. Pivot is rocking. Good. Good, good, good. Always check. You never want to break a pivot or misalign something and then tighten down the screw of the bridge that holds it in place. It's always a bad idea. Always check before you tighten. Alright, let's add some power into your mainspring. Looks good. Alright, so now it's pretty good. Let's give it a shot. See how we do. Well, it's moving. It'll move a lot better in a moment. Okay, step one. Let me go ahead and take a look. Everything's flat and free of dust. Looks good. Coils look good. Let's go ahead and put your Joule in place. That always helps. Have the pivot in its proper location. And then lock it down. I'll be right back. Okay. Well, there we go. We are running. All right, let's check out our work and see how we did. Okay, so we're starting out pretty well. We're going to make some adjustments here. See how we can get this into spec a little bit. Let's take a guess on your beat error. Which again is the relative distance or the time between the tick and the tock. That's at 0.4. Okay, so we gotta move back just a bit. All right. Are we going the right way? Let's make sure. Oh, well, sometimes these things are sticky. They jump like crazy. That's okay. We'll get there. All right. There we go. Let's come back just a bit more. Tighten that up. There we go. Okay. Doing good. That probably was a little too far. Yep. Okay, that looks pretty good in terms of beat errors. So now we have a little bit of an adjustment to make for your rate. So let's do that. Okay. Okay. So that looks pretty good. We'll be able to dial that in pretty well once things have broken in. All right, so let's watch these numbers for a moment, see if they're going to change in the direction we want. Let that lubrication work its way around the movement. Yeah, that looks pretty good as a starting point. All right. Not bad. Not bad. Clean signal. Let's see if we get above 220, which is always a good marking point. That's sort of where we want to see things go. And this is going to make its way sort of down and then up and then down and then up, and the average will continue to climb. It's just the way these movements break in as the lubrication makes its way around the pallet fork and the escape wheel. Yeah, we'll go through these dips and valleys. Cool. Excellent, excellent. Yeah, that's what we want to see. All right, well, we're going to let this break in for a little bit. Let's let it do its thing. Freshly lubricated, it takes a little while. So we're going to come back and have a look. All right, we'll be back. Okay, Gary, well, here are your numbers after just a little while of breaking in. I suspect these are going to get better over time. You're in the mid 230s, plus or minus a couple seconds a day. This is exactly where we want these movements to be. They just run great right in this range, and yours is super accurate. I had to do a little bit of work with your hairspring just to kind of get it back to being true. It was, I have a theory that perhaps they, if they're sitting in a bad position over a long period of time, or they get bumped or something happens, they kind of get a memory of that location, and sometimes that limits their ability to do, maximum performance. And so this is a slight adjustment I have to make to the, it's a little piece that touches your hairspring and allows for adjustments. And so once that's adjusted properly, they run great, but they can be really sensitive to that kind of motion. Anyway, regardless, it's just one of those kinds of things you have to do in order to get things to run where you want them. But I would say this is where we want it. 230s in that range, at least, starting off breaking in right in this area. We're doing great. I think this is what we want to see. Okay, so now we switched over to the calendar side, and we're going to proceed with components on this side that need to be assembled. First, as always, we have to lubricate the recommended lubrication points with the equivalent lubrication of varying viscosities. Okay. We also use a little bit of grease, which kind of stays put slightly better than oils, so I tend to use that as well for high friction, high pressure components. Okay. For example, right here. All right, so now sorry for the snoring again. Not much I can do about that. Okay. It's good to see your hacking lever's working just fine. There we go. Okay. Put your spring in place. Okay, very good. Right. Excellent. Okay. Good. I'm waiting for a moment to get your crown and your stem fully back together because I noticed that your crown was not seated directly against your case. Now I'm not sure if this is an artifact of Seiko engineering from 40 years ago, 40 plus years ago, or what, but it was stopping your crown from locking in a way that I was happy with. So I'm gonna wait to see how your crown and stem go back together here so that we can be assured that everybody's the right length. Because it should just go straight against the case at that point, and it's not. So it gives me a little pause. I'm not really concerned necessarily, just interested to see, once we get everything back together, how it's all going to look. And there we go. Good. All right. So this is just temporarily put on. There's no thread lock or epoxy yet. All right. Let's finish up with the calendar works. So we can put all your wheels back in place here. Minute intermediate wheel. Let's go ahead and put your hour wheel. Your hour hand attaches here. And let's get this intermediary gear installed. Connects your hour to your date. Okay, now everybody should engage. That's nice. Okay, good. All right, so now for your date wheel. Okay, there we go. And the plate. Okay, 4 screws to hold this down. Right on. Okay. Quick date. Let's turn over to midnight here, see how we do. Perfect. Okay. All right, so next is dial in hands, and then we come back for reassembly. We'll be back. Okay, well, we are back in the case. I wanted to show you here the stem, for some reason, from the factory was a little bit too long, and so I've actually shaved a bit of it off in order to make sure that every time your crown is locking. So that's good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and finish up. I'm going to take your winding component here, put that on. Now that we're back in the case, there we go. Okay, let's have a good look to ensure that that is doing its job. Yes, excellent. both directions. Excellent. Okay. It's always good to check these things. All right, for the last component, which is your winding weight. So I've noticed this in your movement. You have a couple little places where either whomever was handling this at the factory put some small little, I don't know, manufacturing marks? I don't even know what to call them, but there's one on a little bridge and there's one right here. It's very interesting to me. That coupled with the, well, there's a few other tiny little things that are just interesting to me about this movement and watch. I mean, it's awesome, but there's always little mysteries about the factory that you learn in a watch that's never been touched or serviced. You always try and, you know, imagine that it's a perfect situation every time, but maybe it's not. All right, so let's go ahead and get your case back on. Let's get that finished up here. Make sure that's ready to go. All right. Let me get a little clean up here. And then we can talk about what we did. All right, well, I think you kind of know how I feel about this watch. It's one of the more stunning examples of a 6105 that I have seen in a very, very long time. It's just so pristine in so many ways. And now it's functioning very, very well, in addition to the beauty of the case and the dial and hands. It's just so nice. So your watch has been fully serviced. It's got a set of new, let me make it so it's not so reflective here, set of new jewels in the mainspring components, so that's nice to have. We put in a new crystal. Here's your seal from your crown, so that's been rebuilt. You can see I'm trying to push this with my tweezers here, and it is a brick. There's your bushing that we've replaced, and that will come back, of course. Here are your other gaskets. This was underneath of your, this is the bezel gasket, and it is a hard piece of plastic, as is your case back seal. Here's your old crystal, which has a bit of hazing. That hazing comes from oils sort of becoming volatile within the movement and coating the inside of the glass. But your crystal is original. You know, this is still something to keep with the watch as a piece of its history. You had, as soon as I went to take your dial off, I'm not sure if you can quite see this, but this is a, let me grab that. That is a dial foot screw. And what's really interesting about that is I think that what happened to that, if I can find it here, it's on my bench. What happened to it was that it got sort of turned and perhaps over tightened right at the moment that it was first put in. And when I went to undo it, even though there's very little stress on that actual screw, the screw itself actually just broke right out. And I was very lucky in the sense that there's no pressure, put onto that screw in the movement, you know, there's no rust or anything that's actually holding it, which is not why it broke. It broke because the head was actually tightened at an angle, and I think it cracked in the beginning of its life. And as soon as I went to remove it, it just broke. And so I just replaced it with another one. But that's something to keep in mind on the watch. It's absolutely perfectly fine, and the one I put in is an exact replacement, so it's fine. All right, well, your watch itself is now hacking, so I'm going to turn that back on. You know, this is just one of those, again, one of those watches that I look at and I salivate. You're going to notice the action of your bezel is much tighter than it was, and it may seem quite tight. And I think, you know, that is the factory specification. It's supposed to be tight because it is a bezel for a dive watch. It's not supposed to turn. And the reason it was loose to begin with is because this gasket, which goes inside of here, inside this bezel, it actually just fell out. It was so dry and so old. And so this has been lubricated. You have a very a clean click ball that's in great shape. And you know, you can hear the action of that click ball. And I can tell that the ball itself has really never worn into the groove that it falls into around the bezel. It's so new in terms of the amount of wear on the wear spot of that click ball. So you have essentially factory tight bezel here, and it just feels so good. Again, rebuilt crown, new seal on the back, new crystal, movement serviced. I didn't do anything cosmetically to your watch at all. I just cleaned it, or sonication and just soapy water and a rag, and it just came out phenomenal. You have this really, really nice factory brushing on the case. So I am just enamored. This is such a great watch, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to work on it. Everything, of course, works exactly as it should. We can turn over the day and date. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm sorry, just the date. Just the date. This is a date only. Okay, so then we can do the quick date. And again, that works exactly as it should. And your crown, of course, locks as it should. All right, well, Gary and Elaine, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I hope that you enjoy your watch when you get it back and you wear it in good health and enjoy it for another 40 plus years of enjoyment. All right, well, thanks again. Okay, Gary, well, these are your final numbers on your watch, and I just could not be happier with where we are. This is really just perfect. Everything's doing great. The watch looks good, it runs good. I'm really happy with where we are. All right, thanks a lot.